Hey, what's going on, Stefan? How you doing tonight?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm getting over the flu. I
Oh,
had the flu type B for about a week.
that's great.
Yeah, today's the first day that I'm actually feeling okay. Even yesterday I was feeling pretty bad. Today I'm finally feeling okay. Woke up
Good.
feeling bad, but now I'm feeling okay.
We need you at 100%.
Yeah, well, you got me at like 93,
I'll take it.
maybe 70.
I'll take it.
Okay. Yeah, so welcome to the Strangeland podcast. Tonight we are talking about a much less known case involving the deaths of 4 men in a missing persons case for the 5th man. So there were 5 men that we're talking about tonight. To this day, it has been 40 years and 17 days since the night of this strange and tragic event. A lot of what we're going to talk about is very unknown, and it's still a great mystery. And that's what makes this case just so exciting. We hope to bring you the facts as they are, and we are excited to try and dive into the theories behind the deaths of 4 men and the disappearance of Gary Mathias. Some people have called this the American Dyatlov Pass.
The men were Gary Mathias, who was 25, Bill Sterling, who was 29, Jack Hewitt, who was 24, Ted Weiher, who was 32, and Jack Madruga, who was 30. All 5 men had learning disabilities or suffered from some sort of mental illness. Gary Mathias himself had been diagnosed with schizophrenia while he was in the Army in the early 1970s. And this diagnosis would force him to be psychiatrically discharged from the Army. While he was in the Army, he had developed several drug problems, and all these problems are said to actually led to the diagnosis of schizophrenia. When Gary got back from the Army, he was living with his parents. He almost got arrested for assault twice and had suffered from multiple psychotic episodes, which landed him in an administration hospital. And by 1978, he was out of the hospital and being treated with stelzine and cognitin. He was considered a successful case in the eyes of the hospital. He worked at his stepfather's gardening business and would spend a lot of his free time with his friends. Again, all of the other 4 men he was friends with had some type of learning disability. All of the 5 men lived in Yuba City, California, and that is where the night in question will begin.
So it was February 25th, 1978. The group of 5 young men would attend a college basketball game played at California State University. Their favorite basketball team, the Gators, were going to start a week-long tournament, which had actually been sponsored by the Special Olympics and was taking place in Chico, California. The boys drove from Yuba City to Chico, which was a 50-mile drive. They took Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego, as he was the only person with a driver's license and a car. Mathias, I believe, also had a license, but no car. The game that was going on that night was UC Davis versus Chico State. The boys were cheering on UC Davis. After the Davis team won the game, the boys went a short distance from the college campus to a market store in Chico. They were seen by a store clerk and they had bought snacks, sodas, and cartons of milk. This would be the last time that anyone saw any of these boys alive again. The men's parents had stayed up to await the return of their sons, but when the morning came and went, they called the police. The police in Yuba County, as well as Boot County, began searching along the highways that the men would have taken to Chico. A few days later, however, a Plumas National Forest ranger talked to investigators, saying that he had seen Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego parked along a road in the forest the night that the boys went missing. He hadn't noticed being significant, considering people often went up to these parts of the forest for many outdoors reasons. He led the investigators to the car on February 28th, 3 days after the young men went to the college basketball game.
The investigators discovered the car where the forest ranger said it was. They found evidence inside the car of candy wrappers and an empty milk carton, soda cans, which they had purchased in Chico at a gas station after the basketball game had ended. They discovered the car about 70 miles away from Chico, and it was way off of any route to Yuba City. This is a gigantic mystery, and no one can seem to actually figure out why they ended up there at that specific place. The parents of the men could not explain why they would drive 70 miles off course up into the mountains in a forested area. The car had been stuck in snow drifts in the road, about 4,400 feet in elevation. The car stopped just before the road had been closed for winter. The police say that the car was not stuck bad enough where 5 young, healthy men couldn't have just pushed it out. When the men abandoned the car, the keys were not left in it, which is also an interesting detail. This would indicate that the car had broken down in some sort of way, but the police were able to actually hotwire the car, and it started right up. They also discovered it still had a quarter tank of gas still left in it. The car also had no damage in any sort of way. It did not have any extensive damage to the body, and it didn't have anything under the undercarriage of the car. This car had been driven up thousands of feet on a rocky dirt road through the mud and snow and had no damage to it at all. One could take this as a hint that the car had been driven by someone who had known their way up to the road, or maybe it was a simply carefully driven ride up. It's also stated that Madrugas wouldn't actually let anyone drive his car. He was very specific about it, and he made it a point to let everyone know. Either way, this is beyond strange. Why the boys would drive 70 miles away from where they had been up thousands of feet and through a forest mountain road just to leave a perfectly working car there is sort of strange. The car had gas, it started up right away. Even if it had been stuck, it's speculated that the 5 men most definitely could have gotten the car unstuck by pushing it all together. I mean, there's no way the snow could have held back that. They could have, shoveled
They were
snow
strong,
away. Yeah.
They were in their 20s and like 30.
Right, and they
32.
have military experience.
Yeah, they could have pushed it out.
These are guys that,
And this is said by the police that showed up there. It's not like we're just saying, oh, they probably could have pushed it out. When the police got there, they assessed, how stuck the car was, and they said that, the boys definitely could have pushed this car out. And like Stefan said, there was gas in the car. The keys were taken, and there was it hot wired right up. So there's nothing wrong with the car, but they still just left it.
Right.
It was very, very odd.
Yeah, at first I maybe thought, hey, like, what if the battery had died? The coldness, sort of got to the car battery. But even if that was the case, they wouldn't have been to hotwire it and start it up.
Exactly. And this was, 3 days later that it was found. It was on the 25th that the basketball game was on the 25th. They found the car on the 28th. 2 to 3 days later,
right.
The car started right up. So, and they could have pushed it out. It had gas. It's just a very strange circumstance.
Yeah, it appears to be that they, stopped on purpose of their own free will.
And then just got out and walked away. So at this point, the police have the 1969 Mercury Montego, and all 5 of the men are reported as missing. They have no idea where they are, and honestly, finding the car put more questions in the investigators' minds than it answered. The bodies of 4 of the men would be found 4 months later. It was on June 4th when a group of motorcyclists went to a trailer that had been maintained by the Forest Service, and the trailer was about 19 miles from where the car had been found. When they got to the trailer, the motorcyclists found that the front window had been busted out, and they found an overwhelming odor coming from inside the trailer. The overwhelming odor turned out to be the decaying body of Ted Weher. After the discovery of the trailer and Ted's body, searchers came back and searched the roads leading from where the car was found to the trailer. The next day, they found the remains of what would later be identified as Jack Budraga and Bill Sterling. They found the remains about 12 miles away from where the car had been found. The bodies had been partially consumed and scattered by animals, and only bones remained. The autopsies would show that they would both die of hypothermia. They believed that one of the men died first and the other never left his side. Multiple search parties were ongoing, and 2 days after they found Madruga and Sterling's remains, Jack Hewitt's father found the remains of his own son. They were about 2 miles away from the trailer, and they found a skull about 300 feet away from the body, and using dental records, they confirmed that it was the remains of Jack Hewitt. Jack's cause of death was attributed to hyperthermia. His remains were found northeast of the trailer, and about 400 meters northwest of the trailer. Searchers found 3 Forest Service blankets and a flashlight off the side of the road. So we can't be sure if they were left by Gary or what, as no one can be sure how long the items were left there. And Gary Mathias was never found. So now they found all 4 of the bodies, right? 2 of them were 12 miles away from where the car had been found and quite a bit away from the trailer, and one of them was 2 miles away. And then they find Forest Service blankets and a flashlight 400 yards northwest of the trailer. And now remember, this is a Forest Service trailer, so one can just, deduce that they came from the trailer, that these blankets and the flashlight came from the trailer.
Right.
And so they found Ted's body in the trailer.
Yeah, listen, like, there's so much mystery around this, and why these men acted the way they did is still a mystery. Like, that's why we're talking about it. It's weird to try and think about, like, what they were doing.
Yeah, what were they doing?
And why were they all split up?
Why were they split up? Because they drove 70 miles. They drove 70 miles away from where they were at in the opposite direction of home, up thousands of feet of dirt road and snowy forest, and then just left the car that is working perfectly, that they could have gotten unstuck. And there doesn't seem to be any evidence that they even tried to get it unstuck. And then they just walk, and they split up because they find 2 of the bodies 12 miles away from the trailer. And it's said that they split up before they even reached the trailer, because there's evidence that 3 of the boys, Gary and Ted and Jack, all were at the trailer at some point. But Bill Sterling and Madruga, it's claimed that they never actually made it to the trailer. The other 3 did. Those 2 split off and went a different direction. So they had conflicting ideas about, either where they were going, and how to get home, and, between the group, because they split.
Right. It almost looks like, if they did get separated from the car and somehow, they lost their way, right? In a way, it sort of looks like they were like, let's split up in each sort of direction, see if we can find it, and then never made their way back or something.
Yeah.
It could have been that.
They just got lost. I mean, it's nighttime, it's snowy.
Right.
When they split up, it's why they say don't split up. Because if you split up in that scenario, you're not...
You're stronger in numbers.
And you're probably never going to find the people again. Especially in that environment, that circumstance, you're just lost. So.
3 heads are better than 1.
Yeah, and I think the next part of this is the craziest part of this story. So why don't you get into that?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the biggest mysteries surrounding this case comes from the trailer itself and the evidence found inside. The trailer was used and supplied as a Forest Service trailer, and it was stockpiled with a tremendous amount of food. It also had a fireplace and matches with books that could have easily been used to create a fire to keep everyone warm. The food that was in the storage shed just outside of the trailer had enough food to feed all of the 5 men for up to a year. So strange. Also in this shed contained butane tanks so that, you could use to heat the trailer.
It had a heating system.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of this seems to be overlooked. 12 cans of food had also been opened in the trailer. The trailer was also known to have kept forestry clothing that would, be able to keep them warm in any sort of survival need. None of that had been touched. And, these are things in the trailer that could have kept these men alive.
Yeah, the men basically came into a survival trailer for anyone that was in the forest. And, they used none of the equipment or rations that were there. It's like they came across this trailer and just decided, screw it, we're not going to use any of it. We're going to commit suicide, basically. Because like you said, there was enough food to last them a year, all 5 of them.
Right.
They had a heating tank, a heating system. They had books. There were books in this trailer that
They had an
could have
ample
used.
supply of everything that they would need.
Yeah.
Another strange part of this case is the death of Ted Weher, who was left inside the trailer itself. He had been wrapped from head to toe in 8 sheets on the bed. He had died of a combination of hypothermia and starvation. He died from this combination in that trailer, again stockpiled with food and heating supplies. It is said that he has lived there for 13 weeks, as that was how long his beard had grown, and he was known to be a clean-shaven person, so they could tell that he had been alive for quite some time. His shoes were off as he was on the bed, and they were badly frostbitten and gangrenous. There is evidence to show that Ted was not the only person in the trailer. They found Gary's shoes in the trailer as well, showing that Gary had obviously been there at some point in time. They were actually never able to find Ted's shoes at all, and it's speculated that Gary took them from Ted so that way he could use them. Either way, there's no way Ted could have wrapped himself in these sheets like he was, so someone must have been there to do that. It's thought that Gary's feet may have been swollen from frostbite, and that's why he wanted to wear Ted's shoes, as they may have been a little bit bigger for him.
Yeah, so this is absolutely mind-blowing to me. He dies in a trailer that's stockpiled of food and warmth and clothing and whatever else, and dies of hypothermia and starvation. It's absolutely insane.
And alone from his 4 friends.
Yeah, exactly.
All spread out.
I mean, Gary's there, but what is he doing? Why would they not check? They knew that food was there because 12 of the cans had been opened.
Right.
So why would they not,
So he had eaten a little bit. I mean, it's clear why he hadn't gotten up. If his feet really were frostbitten, like they said they were, he wasn't walking anywhere. His friends would have almost had to have, taken care of him. But again, like, you don't get frostbite over a day. It has to be a long amount of time where you're prolonged coldness.
If they had made it to the trailer, there's the food is in a shed outside the trailer.
Right.
They could have made it to the trailer and then went just kind of looking around. It wouldn't have taken too much searching to find everything they needed to survive. So as soon as the men really went missing, the police filed a report and put missing flyers up, and they offered a reward for anyone that came forward with information about the men. So someone who came forward and talked to police about seeing the Mercury Montego on the dirt road the night in question. His name was Joseph Strons. Joseph, by coincidence, ended up spending the night in his car near where the Mercury Montego was. He had driven up the same dirt road the men had on his way to his cabin when he had gotten stuck in the snow. He got out of his car and started to try and free the car from the snow when he realized he was feeling early symptoms of a heart attack. He went back to his car to rest with the car running. About 6 hours later, he was lying in his car and was in extreme pain when he noticed a pair of headlights coming up from behind him. The car parked some ways behind his, leaving the headlights on, and had a group of people surrounding it. He said it seemed like one of the people was a lady with a baby. He proceeded to call for help, but they stopped talking and turned the headlights off whenever they heard him. After this, he saw flashlights coming from the vehicle and around it, so he called for help again and again. The lights went off. When his pain receded enough, after his car had run out of gas, Joseph found the strength to walk 8 miles down to the lodge for help. He said that he passed the Mercury Montego on the way down, where the voices were coming from, so we know that the car parked behind Joseph was the Montego, but we don't know who exactly was in it. It's hard to say if he was correct when he saw a woman holding a baby. It could just be a trick of the eye. But why would they turn their lights off when he was calling for help? It's hard to imagine that they would have not gone and helped him. I mean, these were 5 young men who seemed to be good guys for the most part, and probably eager to help.
Right.
Yeah, so we know that the men in their car were behind Joseph. And so, that's how we know for sure that this, that this happened. It's just, it brings into question a lot of weird stuff. Was the lady that Joseph saw, was that just a figment of his imagination? Was it a trick of the light? It was dark. He was having a
Right.
heart attack. Maybe
Yeah,
it was.
I think that's the biggest evidence here. Like, a guy having a heart attack probably isn't giving the best eyewitness
Exactly,
account.
at night.
Well,
in the
he's
snow.
giving his best, but
Yeah,
I'm
he
just
definitely
saying
is. It's not going to be great.
yeah.
It's at night. He's having a heart attack. You could just picture a woman holding a baby in the shadows.
And he said he also heard whistling, which could have been the wind. But
Yeah, it could have been the wind. Who knows? But we know that it was their car, and it's hard to imagine why. Yeah, why would they not go and help him? It doesn't make any sense.
it could be as simple as they didn't hear him, or even in a lot of cases that we've looked over previously, like like in the Zodiac case, there was a couple who was shot, and people came up to the car after, saw a man had been shot, and walked away. Didn't say anything, didn't call the police.
Yeah, people get sort of scared in that.
Yeah,
kind of situation.
totally.
And it could be, it could have been they could have had weed or something in the car. We haven't really discussed this yet, but they could have been on drugs. They could have been on something.
They could have been drunk.
They could have been drunk. They could have had something.
They did just win their basketball game. They could have stopped to celebrate. All these men live with their parents. They can't necessarily go home. Maybe.
Yeah, it's hard to say, exactly why, but they could have been scared of being caught for whatever reason, from this guy.
And they could have just as easily, the night after the basketball game, after they partied, they could have just gone back to the car and gone home. So it doesn't explain what kept these 5 men stuck to this particular area in forest.
Mm-hmm. It's just to say that they were definitely there, and he passed the car, and I think that's just the most insane thing ever.
Right.
No,
But the motive, it isn't obvious.
no, it's definitely not obvious. There's so much unknown surrounding this case. We're going to end this case later, still unknown. No one knows really. This is 40 years, and Gary Mathias is still missing. They never found his body.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? How did they never find his body? They found the other bodies right away. And so, at first they definitely assumed that it was some type of foul play, but now they don't really, once they found the bodies and they know the bodies, they weren't murdered or anything. So they kind of ruled out foul play, but where's Gary?
Right. One theory, obviously, where Gary was, when they found one of the bodies, they noticed that it had succumbed to like animal predation, basically. So animals were feeding on the body.
Mm-hmm.
It's very possible that something could have dragged him off.
Yeah, definitely. We're in California. California, they have bears, right?
Oh,
They have brown bears,
Totally.
black bears.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anything could have found. I just feel like there would be evidence too. It's like there's no evidence of Gary at all. The only evidence we sort of have are the 3 blankets and the flashlight.
Right.
And the only reason we have that evidence is because we think that they're from the trailer because it was a Forest Service trailer and they were Forest Service blankets and a flashlight, and they're in the opposite direction of Jack Hewitt because Jack Hewitt went northeast 400 yards. The blankets and the flashlight were found 400 yards northwest. So,
And you have to think about this too, like if Gary had been off of his medication for, let's say even a week, that could have had a big impact on his psyche, on his brain chemistry, the way things are working. His decision-making abilities could have been affected.
yeah, and I think, it definitely could come down to some type of drugs. I'm not, and I think the biggest evidence for this is the fact that he was on drugs in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
He got discharged because of his schizophrenia, right? Well, he was on drugs, and it said that the drugs sort of led to this mental illness. That the drugs sort of, helped him along into being diagnosed in schizophrenia, which is why he was diagnosed that, and which is why he was discharged from the Army. So it's not unreal to say that they were on drugs. Considering, especially like you said a minute ago, that their team had just won the basketball game.
Right.
There's no evidence of weed or anything else, but who knows? Like maybe Gary had the weed on him. We've never found Gary.
Sure.
Maybe they were smoking in the car and they didn't want, and that's why they didn't, want to get caught. And that's why they didn't help Joseph when he was calling out for help.
Right. Well, the only weird thing I would have to say about that is, like, why would you drive 70 miles in the opposite direction to smoke weed on a mountain?
So that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So the one thing that we talked about was the fact that Gary had friends 20 miles away in a city. I can't remember the name of the city, but it was about 20 miles away from where the car was. And it's speculated that they were going to go visit that set of friends.
Right.
So Gary had other friends, and maybe they were going to, go visit them, and they just got lost. What that doesn't answer, that answers why, that gives a answer as to why maybe they went 70 miles out of their way.
Right.
And then maybe they got lost. So we can say that could have happened. There's a theory for that.
Totally.
But what doesn't make sense is they get out of their car, which is in perfect working order, and they don't turn around and go the way they came from, right? They kept going where they were going. So they went straight. So they got out of the car and kept going, which is, it doesn't match what usually happens with people that are lost. When people are lost, they typically retrace their steps, right? So if they're going this way, if they're going one way, they get stuck and they have to walk. They're going to walk back from the way they came because they know where they came from, at least, right?
Right.
And that they have the highest chance of finding help if they do that. However, they kept going straight. So they kept going into the unknown because they had no idea where they were. Mm-hmm. Right? And then they separated eventually, which also shows that they had no idea where they were going because two of them probably disagreed with the other three and decided to go this other way.
Right. And yeah, I think like that's pretty, like, I think if you think about it, that makes sense for them to all sort of have their own ideas on which way to go. And in a panic situation, that's what you see. Like, that's how people end up getting lost, is they end up second guessing themselves. They get turned around a little bit and everything is skewed. And I think it's a lot easier than people realize to get stuck or get lost somewhere where you're not necessarily familiar with the area.
And that's why I think the biggest mystery about this case would probably have to be Ted's death in the trailer. It makes no sense.
It's an eerie scene, you know?
I mean, the reason that I've seen someone give, is to say that they were scared that if they took anything from the trailer, they would get in trouble. Now, these are people who all of them had some form of either mental illness or mental disability. Mm-hmm. So maybe they were a little bit slower. And that's what is said, that they were a little bit slower. But to the point of death,
yeah, I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
You're going to say that they're scared of getting in trouble to take food,
right,
in case they die.
Starve someone for 4 weeks, put food
even,
in front of them, and
even
say,
a few
I dare
days,
you not to.
Yeah. The only thing that we can assume why Ted died the way he did is he was wrapped up in blankets. This is my idea, right?
Right.
He got there with Gary. We know Gary was in the trailer, right? Gary helped Ted get wrapped up in the sheets because when they got to the trailer, he already had frostbite on his feet,
right,
and he was already gangrenous, right?
It'd probably take him a couple days to figure out where they were and then find this shelter in total.
Exactly. So they had been walking in the snow for all this time,
right?
For at least a day. So he, I think, couldn't walk anymore. He got onto the bed and then he could not get up. Gary wrapped him up in sheets, and then Gary left. Gary took Ted's shoes. He figured, okay, well, he's in this trailer now, he's warm, he'll be fine, but my feet have probably swollen a little bit, so my shoes are hurting. So he takes Ted's shoes and leaves, tries to find his own way, gets lost, gets eaten by animals, whatever happened to him. Right. And now Ted can't get up because he's sick and he has frostbite and he has gangrene going through his feet. And so he can't get up, and he's wrapped up in this blanket. And so if we assume that that's how that happened, then we can assume that Ted died a relatively miserable death.
Yeah, terrible. Like starvation, you know what I mean?
But even if that were the case, it's like, why would Gary just leave? this place had heat and food, shelter, clothing to last them a year or more,
Right.
and he leaves Ted there.
Well, this is also another aspect of it. Gary could have been looking for the other members of the group. If they had got split up for any way, he could have tried to do like a one-man search party sort of situation.
Yeah, he may have just known or had thought he knew where they were.
Right. Another interesting part of this story is a woman who had worked at a small town store about 30 miles away from where the Montego was found claimed that she actually saw 4 of the men come into the store to buy soda and milk and snacks. 2 of the men came inside to purchase the goods, and 2 others went to the phone booth outside to make a call. She claimed that the men got into a red pickup truck and left. This happened 2 days after the disappearance. The owner of the store backed up this claim as well, saying that he saw the 4 men himself. It should be said that she claimed this after she had seen the flyer with the men's faces on it and a reward that was posted for $1,200. So you never know if she was...
Yeah, and $1,200 is... in today's time, inflation money, whatever,
Right.
Currency, it's about $4,000, $4,500, something like
It's
that.
a lot of money.
So it's a decent amount of money for just a store clerk working in this market out and sort of in the middle of nowhere. And I think that's something that you see all the time, anyways. You put up flyers with rewards on them, and you see people making stuff up, and it's
Right.
like maybe she didn't, make this up. I would like to say she didn't, but it's
Right.
she probably did.
There's a part of me that does think that maybe, okay, so let's give her the benefit of doubt, right? Let's say that she didn't intentionally lie to get the money, but because she had seen this flyer already, she's looking back in her memories, and humans are known to forge their own memories in a lot of cases, and especially if there's some sort of incentive behind a corroborating story of, what she had seen. I don't think this is reliable at
No,
all
not at all.
whatsoever. It's not even relevant, really. What does the red pickup truck have to do with
Just some
anything?
random red pickup truck.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably what happened. She saw these pictures and made it up in her mind. But the reason why this doesn't make sense, if you just read into it, it makes zero sense. Why would they be in a red pickup truck? Why would 2 days after they went missing, why would they stop by this market, get stuff, and then go down the road? What are all 5 men running away from home?
Right.
And then if that were the case, why were all 4 of the boys, 4 of the 5 boys, men, why were they found dead? What are they doing?
Yeah.
Who are they with?
And if they were running away and they had a car and they were seen at a store 30 miles away from where the Montego was found, they're moving pretty dang slow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They're not
exactly.
really running all that hard
No.
if they're running away.
And I really hope that we displayed the strangeness of this episode. It's so weird. They go to this basketball game, their team wins. They have a good time. They get just regular snacks, sodas, milk, basic stuff, just little snacks to eat and stuff. And then they wind up 70 miles away in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the snowy forest, with a car that works fine, walk away. 4 of them are found dead, and 1's missing forever, with no signs of foul play at all. And 1 that is found dead in a trailer that could have kept all 5 of them fed and warm for a year. And so this is just the strangest thing,
Yeah, this is sort of like different from our other episodes where we have a conclusion, an end.
Yeah, there is no end.
No.
We have to think of it ourselves. You kind of have to come up with your own theories on this.
Yeah, it's all speculation.
Yeah, so, if you want to know more about it, look it up. Just look up videos of it. Honestly, there is not that much information. I've yet to find a single person that's even heard of this case. No one's heard of it. I actually found it on Reddit, which,
Yeah.
of course, Reddit's like, you can find anything on Reddit. It's
Of
probably
course.
it's probably my favorite website. But, yeah, no one's heard of it. I mentioned it to everyone that I know, and what is that? Even the people that I know who know everything, like our friend Kathleen. She's never heard of it. And I'm like, okay, well, this is insane.
Yeah, it's definitely lesser known, and for good reason. Like, it's so mysterious. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily a satisfying case in that way because there's so much left unknown, and
Yeah.
there's no way to tell. It's been too long to really.
Yeah, he'll never come. Gary will never, we'll probably never find his body. I mean, where is his body right now?
Yeah.
Right? No one, if they didn't find his body when they found the other bodies or shortly after, they're probably never finding his body.
Yeah, well, they're not looking. They're also not looking.
They're not looking. His body, honestly, is probably just buried somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that someone killed him and buried him, which, not ruling that out necessarily, but probably not. But more than likely what happened was he was killed by animals and somehow his body got buried naturally. And so they probably won't find his body ever. I mean, if they find his body, it will be in 200 years when the information on his case is unknown and lost somewhere, and they won't know who he is, and they'll just they'll bury him somewhere in an unmarked grave or something, which is sad. But yeah, so they'll probably never find Gary. So it's a complete mystery that will never have an answer. I doubt it ever will. So
My best guess, honestly, is that Gary probably died like the rest of his friends by hypothermia and got eaten up by animals in the end,
and just carried away and buried somewhere.
But it doesn't explain how they got into that situation at all.
And that's an explanation that you're just going to have to try to come up with. I mean, we said maybe drugs, but we've also said that they had some learning disabilities, that they've had some mental illnesses. He had schizophrenia. He probably wasn't on his meds. More than likely he didn't take his meds to the basketball game. So that's, so now we're saying he was at least off his meds for a couple of days.
Right.
Who knows what those were. And if he did take any type of drugs, even weed, even marijuana, which is a natural thing, it's not like a, chemically based drug.
Sure.
It's, it could have some weird effects on them.
Totally.
Because why would they just leave the car and walk off and go to this trailer? And why would none of them stay in the trailer and eat the food and keep warm and...
Right. Like, if anything is clear about this case, with all of the mystery, if anything is clear, it's that good judgment really wasn't used. Like,
oh God, no.
And I'm not saying that to fault them in any way. I'm just saying there was a lot of things that could have turned out this case to be completely different. And these guys definitely had a potential of leaving that mountain alive. It's just unfortunate the way it ended.
That is why it's so unfortunate, because they were so close to, to living.
Right.
The trailer had everything for them to live. They were so close. I mean, Ted was in the trailer. Gary was in the trailer. That's the biggest mystery, I think. Why did Gary leave?
Right.
Why would Gary have left? If he had the ability to walk out of the trailer, and let's say the flashlight and the blankets that they found were his, if he had the ability to walk out of the trailer and walk 400 yards northwest of the trailer, he had the ability to run that trailer and keep it warm and get food and wait it out.
Yeah.
I think that's the mystery. Why would he leave? What kind of judgment was used by Gary when he decided to leave?
Yeah, and that we'll never know, honestly, but it is sort of an interesting case to ponder on, and there's so many roads that could have been taken. That's sort of why this case is tough too, because
so random.
Yeah, in every situation there's a plethora of different events that could have taken place, and it's hard to imagine what would need to happen for this outcome,
Yeah, so this episode's definitely a shorter episode. I mean, we're at 40 minutes right now. It's probably going to be a little bit longer than that, maybe 42 minutes or something. So this is, way shorter than any of the other ones we've had. And like Stefan said earlier, it's because there's no conclusion. We're trying to lay out this crazy event, and you can, sort of think about it for yourself and figure it out on your own. So yeah, so that ends this episode. We want to remind you to check us out on Facebook, which is just facebook.com/the Strangeland Podcast. We're on iTunes. We're on Google Play. We're on Apple Podcast, of course. We're on Stitcher Radio, and we're on basically any podcast app that you could find. And we're also on SoundCloud.
Yeah, don't forget about our YouTube page as well. You can just search for the Strangeland Podcast. Make sure you sub to us and like and comment.
Definitely. And what are we talking about next week, Stefan?
So next week, we'll cover the case of Catherine Knight.
Yeah, that episode will not be short.
No, definitely not.
That will probably be an hour at least.
It is Catherine Knight. So Catherine Knight wasn't a serial killer, just to put it out there. She was a murderer, but not a serial killer. So
she did some messed up shit. She was crazy. She was absolutely insane. Just batshit crazy.
Yeah, she's an interesting character for sure. She had a lot of personality. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and so like Stefan said, we're doing Catherine Knight next week. And we have a whole list of shows lined up. We release every single week. Typically, we'll release Wednesday morning. You know, if something weird comes up, maybe Thursday. But, you know, Wednesday morning is typically when we release episodes on all of our podcast apps and on iTunes and that sort of thing. And it'd be Wednesday afternoon usually is when it's uploaded to YouTube. Right. And also we're at strangelandpod.com. That's our website. Check that out. It's really cool. I like it at least.
Yeah, email us. Check out our website. Let us know if you have any cases that you guys find interesting that you think we should cover.
Oh,
we want to hear about it, definitely.
Yes. Yeah, and our email is thestrangelandpodcast@gmail.com. Alrighty. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's really crazy, really weird. Do some research for yourself because it is very interesting.
Thanks, guys.